Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades. In a special episode today, I figured I was going to do something that's at the same time basic and I think deeply illuminative for Christians who are coming from either a Protestant tradition or maybe Orthodoxy, though they're less skeptical about chronology. It's both because it's really basic, and this isn't deep research comprising this show, but it's the kind of research and commentary that represents a sort of fact that stares you in the face from plain sight. And that's the fact that when you're a Christian, if you're a Christian all the way, if you have the fullness of the faith, not only do the priests and bishops in your church go all the way back to Rome, to the first priests and the first bishops, who are the 12 apostles, and the first head bishop, which is Pope Peter, but also you see, and the Orthodox share that with us, by the way, you also see that everyone at the time within Christendom, before the treaty of, before Constantine made Christianity legal, Edict of Milan, and after, accepted the papacy. And this became really clear to me last summer as I debated Jay Dyer twice. And it's become even more clear when you just look at casual facts of, say, the first 35 or so popes. There's an absolute chain of evidence that links the popes to being the visible sign of unity for Christendom on earth. And it's kind of casual surety, the kind of casual certitude you have when you know you're telling the truth. And you don't have to invent an alibi. There's a casualness, a nonchalance to that sort of certitude in where were you on the night of the 5th? You can just say, well, okay, let me search what actually happened, and what actually happened will vindicate me because I am not a murderer. I actually wasn't in the place that I'm suspected of being. And there's something deeply convincing about this for Catholics and for honest, intellectually serious Protestants and Orthodox as well. So we're going to go through all 267 popes, but we're probably going to do about a third at a time. We're going to go through the first 85 today, their time period. There's something remarkable about the first swath of the first third of the first 100 popes. The first 35 were all saints. We're going to get through 85 or 86 today. Then we're going to do a part 2 and a part 3. And you're just going to see a lot of these guys were ballers. The first 35 were all heroes, saintly heroic. And they all did stuff that's recognizable and cognizable, even if you didn't know that they did it. And everyone on earth who was a Christian recognized them. And after, of course, the Edict of Milan, then even all the emperors on earth recognized them for that first millennium. It's very convincing stuff for the prospects of Roman Catholicism. What I'll be using today, I want to stump a couple things. As always, realestateforlife.org. This is the time of the year when it's best to start a move if you can. Get out of your blue state, get to a red state, go to realestateforlife.org. Also, I'm using this phone. I've got 2 phones today, and on this one, I'm using a nifty new product called KlingK. You can find these at KlingK.com, where it's literally propping up the phone that's propping up the research here, and it's relevant for the show. So go to KlingK.com. It's really cool. It's got these little grippy feet things here. So you can put it on your steering wheel. You can put it vertically or horizontally. Pops right onto the back of your phone, and it's incredibly effective. So that's what I'll just be looking at on 2 phones. I need a second one for this other phone I'm using so I can navigate the 2 basic websites I'm using to bring you this list of popes. KlingK.com. If you don't mind gluing something onto the back of your phone to give you a really, really nifty and ergonomically correct little pseudopod, a little foot for it that can also grab and act like a hand. It's pretty cool. If you mind that, then there's also a magnetic feature where you can, that's what I'm waiting to get on this phone too. KlingK.com. It's pretty nifty. And it's actually helping here today in the research. So the first pope, I also don't want to be here forever on a Saturday. So I'm gonna make this as fast as I can while still effective. The first pope, as you know, is Petrus, Peter the First. The last pope, we are told, will be named Peter the Second. And that means a lot of crazy stuff is about to happen if we get a Peter II. But Peter I was born Simon of Iona. He's a Jewish peregrine engaging in Jewish peregrinatio. That means pilgrimage. So he's a pilgrim from the free provincial subject Roman Empire, who is not a Roman citizen the way Paul would be. Peter, as you know, is traditionally Pope number 1, capital T traditionally. He's the only one to be crucified upside down, particularly at his own request. He stands at the pearly gates. He was given in consummation of the Old Testament the keys, the Davidic keys of the kingdom. This makes deep typological connections between the Old Testament and the New. He's also a little bit of a goofball, which gives hope to the rest of us. If he's chosen as the leader of the church, not the greatest of the 12 apostles necessarily, which I think was pretty obviously John the Beloved. He wasn't Pope John the Beloved. Peter was. And the greatest of the apostles in the Acts of the Apostles period is probably Paul, if you judge it on merit. Peter was among the top most important and favorite apostles. Peter, James, and John. Peter, James, John, and later Paul. But he was in the top, 25% of apostles if we're doing like a law school ranking system. But he was not probably the top one. And so that tells us something. The popes do not need to be impeccable, nor are they infallible unless they make the kinds of ex cathedra decrees that we're really only sure 2 popes have done, maybe more. Peter reigned from 30 to 64 AD. It gets a little hazy whether or not he was actually killed in the Mamertine prison there, which you can go sit in. We lived a short walk away from the Mamertine in 64 or 65. Some people even say 67. So he remained pope until 67, but he might have been dead. They just didn't want to change guard early. But change guard they did. Pope number 2 is Pope Linus, also a saint. The next 33 popes after Linus will all be saints. He's mentioned in the New Testament. Again, the casual historicity chain of evidence that that you can cross check to contextualize the fact that these guys were real guys. They were the real leader after Peter from 67 to 76, the next 9 years. Saint Linus is mentioned in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 21. He's credited with decreeing that women should cover their heads in church. Can you believe that? The second pope says women should cover their heads in church. St. Peter was too busy being crucified
right out the gate,
upside down. But right out the gate, the first successor is like, women, read the Bible. Well, the Bible wasn't even around then.
But isn't the
cover
church
your heads.
feminist?
Yeah. Well, weren't the popes feminists? And he's mentioned there. So Peter's in the Gospels. Linus is in the epistles. And he reigns from 67 to 76. What will also be mentioned in the epistles to Timothy, same letters which existed then but weren't yet canonized for another 300 years after 67 to 76 AD. Also in 1 Timothy is a bunch of base stuff about women covering their heads. So the same epistle that mentions Pope Linus, the second pope in the church, Pope St. Linus, is the epistle to Timothy, which says what Linus really was known for. Women need to cover themselves in church. Number 3, Saint Anacletus or Saint Pope Cletus. I would go by Anacletus. Cletus is too redneck from The Simpsons for me. 76 to 88, a 12-year reign. He was the first to divide Rome into 25 parishes. And he's the one who built a monument over St. Peter's burial site. So a monument there in Rome, does that sound like you're honoring just an ordinary first among equals bishop right from the outset? Pope number 3, Saint Anacletus, or if you're drinking Natty Light with him, Pope Saint Cletus, builds a monument to Peter, who had just died like 12 years before Saint Anacletus became Pope number 3. He died 12 years before, and he builds a monument over St. Peter's burial site. He divides Rome into 25 parishes. By the way, Pope Linus, mentioned in the second letter to Timothy, is the first Roman pope. Cletus is the first Greek pope. Another Peregrinus, another traveler. We have a daughter named Peregrine. It means traveler. Free provincial subject of the Roman Empire, not a citizen, just like Peter. He was once split. His person historically was split by bad historians into Cletus and Anacletus. Those are just his two personas, right? You're drinking Natty Light and watching the big game. That's Cletus. Business in front, party in back. Anacletus is when you're getting down to business. Also revered as a saint in Eastern Christianity. Same feast day. Pope number 4, 88 to 99. Some people say 97 is when he died, but the next pope wouldn't be elected until 99. So maybe there's two sedevacante years at the death of the fourth pope. Is Saint Clement I, who wrote the ever important first epistle of Clement, one of the oldest non-biblical Christian documents still in existence, and one of the most important, particularly when you dialogue with Protestants and Orthodox. I'll tell you why in a second. So Clement I, Pope number 4, is the first pope who's actually a Roman citizen. No. Sorry. The second one who's a Roman citizen. Number 2, Linus, was a Roman citizen. Number 1 and number 3 were not Roman citizens. So Clement I is the second pope who's a Roman citizen. Fourth pope, born in the capital city of the Roman Empire, which is kind of based. He's the earliest of those considered the patristics. So isn't that based? Pope number 4 is a patristic father. This is already paying dividends because I think a lot of people are able to put the history into perspective here. He issued the letter known as First Clement, which is said to be the basis of apostolic authority for the clergy. You know what else it is? I told Jay Dyer this twice last summer in our 2 debates. It's also considered widely to be the first exercise of universal jurisdiction of the Pope, because he's telling bishops in other dioceses what to do. The fourth Pope, if you listen to the Orthodox, they will make it sound like this didn't exist until Vatican I, or maybe sometime a few hundred years earlier, the Dictatus Papam or something like that, or Unum Sanctum, or something contemporary to one of those two papal bulls. No, the fourth pope, before the year 100, in the year 90, might have been before the year 90, 89. Saint Clement writes the first epistle of Clement, and also historicity out the wazoo here. He is mentioned in the New Testament, Philippians chapter 4, verse 3. It is widely believed that this mention, different name, not Clement I, because that's his papal name. So the third out of the first 4 popes, 3 of them are mentioned in the New Testament. Obviously Peter, and then Linus and Clement, who writes this important letter to other bishops. He was martyred for being tied to by being tied to an anchor and being thrown into the sea, which is,
that's like my worst nightmare.
No, it's happened to me. It actually really hurts. No, it's terrible. Terrible way to die or to be punished. So Clement I is really important. I've cited him a lot. He's considered the first patristic father. The patristic period, some people say, what's going on? The period kind of begins when the last of the 12 apostles dies, which is John, which is why that period is tied to the 90s AD, sometime in the 90s. But it's also the fact that what Clement did as Pope, the fourth Pope, was the first exercise of universal jurisdiction. He's not just the first among equals. This isn't some medieval or late medieval invention or early modern invention with Vatican I. It absolutely goes back all the way to the fourth Pope. See, when you do real history, which usually the Orthodox sound pretty good when they're doing history, you obliterate Protestants. But when you do a little more history, you start to obliterate the Orthodox too. I mean, they're not going to tell you that the fourth pope who took office when John the Apostle was still alive, having mystical revelations, they're not going to tell you that he exercised universal jurisdiction for the first time. That's kind of impressive. It's ruinous to Protestantism, and it also really bulwarks arguments against the Orthodox. Next, we have Saint Evaristus. He began the tradition of assigning titles to Roman priests. So this practice of assigning titles from Roman priests eventuated in the College of Cardinals, conclaves, which I think dates to the 8th or 9th century. I have to check whether it's 8th or 9th. He was a Hellenized Jew, which is, like a Greekified Jew, also a peregrinus, a traveler. He held office, the papacy, from 99 to 105. Some historians backdate it to 97 because they think now that Pope Clement was killed in 97. But a lot of historians will just say, no, start St. Evaristus' pontifical reign at 97. It goes to 105. In that case, it's 8 years. If you start it in 99, it's a 6-year reign. He was also a subject of the Roman Empire who was not a Roman citizen. Feast day shortly before Halloween. Said to have divided Rome into parishes, assigning a priest to each parish. So you see that even during this time period of the first 24 popes, 24 popes before the Edict of Milan, when Christianity was legalized by Constantine in 317 AD, there's still some administrative organization happening. Most of the church was underground for the reign of these first five, the next five popes. But there was organization at work because the church has to be the visible sign of Christ's unity on earth. And that unity was mostly dispatched, administratively speaking, by the work of the Pope. So the Pope is dividing Rome into parishes, into mini dioceses. We'll see the development of that. And eventually assigning titles to priests, which cues up the idea of the College of Cardinals.
That's pretty early.
That's early. Now, it didn't eventuate with the College of Cardinals for 7 or 8 centuries, but you get the point. Okay, this brings us to the 2nd century and Pope number 6, who is Pope Alexander I. Reigned from 105 to 115. I'm going to speed up a little bit if I can. 105 to 115, he's credited with introducing the custom of using holy water mixed with salt to bless Christian homes. Again, you listen to some retarded Protestant and they're like, all these medieval practices of black magic that the church invented when it was rich off of Medici money in the 14th and 15th centuries. It's hot nonsense. Blessing your homes with holy water, we have some holy water at this home, goes all the way back to the 6th Pope who introduced the custom, and mixing with salt. So it's what we call true holy water, not just that happy water you get at Novus Ordo parishes. 105 to 115, he was a Roman citizen born in the capital city of the Roman Empire, which is based. I'm pleased to have been a denizen of that city for a short time.
Some people are noting that it says on Wikipedia 109 to 119. I think some of the dates are disputed.
The dates are disputed by historians then. Most of this was given to us by one historian of the church. Most of the historiography for the popes before the Edict of Milan was given to us by Irenaeus. So don't spurg out if a year or two is off. It's disputed. It's a disputed question. So the holy water in homes thing, he inaugurated that custom, blessing homes, also revered as a saint in Eastern Christianity. Feast day of March 18th, that's my dad's birthday. I don't know if he knows that. So Pope St. Alexander I is Pope number 6 from 105 to 115, give or take 3 years. Any of these first few popes, give or take 3 years. By the way, another saint. Every one of these first 35 popes are saints. Saint Sixtus I is the 7th pope. It would be cool if he were the 6th pope. He passed a decree that ordained ministers were allowed to touch, and only ordained ministers were allowed to touch the sacred vessels of the altar, which is cool. We need that today with our Susan for the parish councils doing the readings, getting their fingerprints all over the everything at the altar, just mucking it all up, trying to be EMs. You know, where's Pope St. Sixtus I when we need him? He's a Roman of Greek descent, born in Italia, the homeland of ancient Romans. Uncertain if he was a peregrinus, a traveler who became a free subject of the Roman Empire, or a citizen itself. He's the first one we don't know. His feast day is April the 6th, actually when Abby had her big surgery, also revered as a saint in Eastern Christianity. Okay. Pope number 8 from 125 to 136 circa, Pope St. Telesphorus. He's a Roman of Greek descent. Uncertain whether he was a peregrinus or a Roman citizen. Church father, that another one, a minor patristic, called by Irenaeus a great martyr, the earliest attested martyrdom of a pope after Peter. So it was not all of the popes. So between Peter and Pope number 8, Linus, Anacletus, Clement, Evaristus, Alexander, and Sixtus I were not martyrs. We thought, I was talking to my buddy here, and we thought it was most of the first 20 popes, but I guess it's only the first and the 8th. Also revered in Eastern Christianity as a saint. Pope number 9, circa 136 to 140. Pope Saint Hyginus.
Unfortunate name.
A great name. It means this guy always smelled great. He always smelled like his deodorant at the end of the day. One of those guys. I was always jealous of those guys. Always had his hair on point. Thank you. Established the role of godparents at baptisms to assist newly baptized in their faith journey. So this is, again, one of these non-scriptural Christian traditions that idiot Protestants who can barely read are going to say aren't truly Christian because they're not exampled in Scripture. And you're like, you know what? Maybe that's right, but it's older than Scripture, which was finally canonized in like 380 circa AD. Pope St. Hyginus said that godparents should be there at baptisms for the newly baptized, paedo-baptism, at the beginning of their faith journey. He's a Greek, Hyginus. He was martyred too. According to tradition, they don't have as much evidence on that, but they think he was the 3rd martyred pope. Pope number 10, he only had a 4-year reign. Pope number 10, Pius I. I have that clock in my, I don't think I've showed it to you, my 12 Piuses clock up in the other room. He's the first of a great line of Pope Piuses, first of 12 Piuses. Pope Pius I ruled from AD 140 to 155. He decreed that Easter should always be celebrated on a Sunday rather than on any day of the week. He's a Roman citizen, brother of the freedman Hermas, martyred by sword, 4th pope to be martyred, decreed that Easter should only be on Sundays. Pope number 11, Saint Anicetus, who reigned from 155 to 166. Pope Pius reigned from 140 to 155. So that's a relatively long reign for then. Peter was the longest, reigned for like 34 years. Not many of the other ones made it to 10 years in the first 10 popes. Pius made it from 140 AD to 155. Saint Anicetus was number 11. And he, are you doing pictures of these or no? Okay, thanks. He reigned for 11 years from 155 to 166 or 167. He was the first pope to formally forbid clergy from growing long hair. I don't like that. I mean, he's a saint too, but I think long hair is a cool look. The apostles all had it. Jesus had it. Like, what was his reasoning on that? You know what I mean? What is this hatred of long hair? I don't get it.
Just mean.
It's mean. But he's a saint, so I won't talk too much ish. He's a Hellenized Syrian, the first Syrian pope. That means he's like, looked like the guys from System of a Down. Tradition holds he too was martyred, was that number 5. Feast day, April the 20th, on Hitler's birthday.
And our daughter's birthday. And
Maggie's. I wonder if there's a connection between Anicetus, Hitler, and Maggie Gordon. Decreed that priests are not allowed to have long hair. That's just so proddy.
So he liked the high and tight.
He liked it high and tight. He liked a haircut you could set your watch to. He would go into the barber and say, "Give me the Johnny Unitas. I need something to set my clock by. A haircut that really works in the Marines, which don't exist yet." So that's Saint Anicetus, 155 to 166. I mean, that's also a shitty thing to be known by. You're Pope of the Roman Church for 11 years, and the biggest thing you did is tell people they can't have cool hair.
Yeah.
Like, come on, bro. Pope Saint Soter. Weird name. Excellent Pope. He reigned from 166 to 174, 175. The Roman citizen born in Italia. He was martyred as well. That's the 6th or 7th one. Declared that marriage was a valid sacrament only if blessed by a priest. So that's important. Only valid as a sacrament if blessed by a priest. That's like the most important thing he did, and that's important. He formally also inaugurated Easter as an annual festival in Rome, which is cool. I like that. In 175, we had Pope number 13, Saint Eleutherius. He reigned for 14 years to 189. Which 189 or 188? He was a Greek, a Peregrinus, free subject of the province of the Roman Empire, not a citizen. Tradition holds he was martyred. What did he do? He abolished several Jewish dietary laws for Christians. Based. Get rid of the Jewish stuff. Eleutherius, do it. Declaring no food should be rejected by the faithful. That's cool. Like, don't waste food. I mean, it's somewhat cool. It's not as cool as some of them, but. And tradition holds he too was martyred. I wonder why popes 1 through 9, only 1 and 9, I think. Number 1 and number 9 were martyred, but like 2 through 8 or 2 through 7 were not martyred. But then you just you catch a bad run of, post-Neronian, post-Caligulan, just mean, murderous Roman emperors. I guess that's all it is. It's just bad luck of the draw. Bad draft class. Number 14 is one that the Orthodox freak out about. They think he's a proof text against the papacy. Nothing of the sort. Pope Victor I. Pope Victor I was a Roman Berber. Pope from 189 to 199-ish. First pope to have been born on the continent of Africa. That's not that cool. But I mean, he's a good guy. He was a saint, and the first to celebrate the liturgy in Latin instead of Greek. Okay, that's old too. That's old. So when contrarian normies would get mad at the Latin Mass people, Latin Mass supremacists like us, they would always say, "Oh, if you want to be really based, you have to say the Mass in Aramaic or in Greek." And it's like, well, that's true to be the oldest. But we're still talking the 100s that a pope celebrates the liturgy in Latin instead of Greek. So I like that. He's known for excommunicating Theodotus of Byzantium. There was the Quartodecimanism controversy. Some of this runs foul of the Orthodox reasons for disliking him. But again, he's out here excommunicating ninjas because he has a universal jurisdiction. Why do popes excommunicate? Because they're him. They're Himothy. They're the guy. They're the guy of guys in the church. And all the bullshit that you've heard, all the brainwash that you've heard from Protestants, Orthodox, secular press, propagandizing you to think that the real autocracy of the papacy began sometime in the late Middle Ages is just facially proven false by this. You have guys out here in the 100s exercising universal jurisdiction, unilaterally excommunicating ninjas that ran foul of them. They're just doing their thing as boss. Like I told Jay Dyer when I debated him, go consult the Office episode where Dwight claims to be in charge of the office, and they're like, "You're not really the boss unless you can fire us." Well, that's how it works with excommunication. A pope can excommunicate the patriarch in the pentarchy. You could do the patriarch of Constantinople, which is number 2 in the church, or of Jerusalem, or of Antioch, or of Alexandria. The other 4 head honchos, well, they're not as head as the patriarch of Rome, the bishop of Rome, because he's the one they all appeal to fire him. I'm not sure Victor excommunicated that kind of. What was Theodotus? Can you look up? Hold on, I'm just going to do it real fast.
I can give you my laptop. Theodotus
and what was he? Was a dynamic monarchian theologian from Byzantium. Yeah, he wasn't a patriarch. But soon we're going to get to popes excommunicating actual patriarchs. Okay, cool. Thanks. This will here. I appreciate this. And once again, I'm going to be stumping this KlingK because I love it. I'm going to get one on my smaller phone here. You can take your phone back here, Lucas, because now I'm going to shift over to that. But it's klingk.com. If you don't mind having accessories on the back of your phone, it's great. It's got the hands and the feet, like a person. Makes your phone like a little person, like a little man. Okay, after Victor, number 14, dies in 198 or 199, you have Saint Pope Zephyrinus taking the office either in 198 or 199. A Roman citizen, once again born in the Roman Empire. Although not physically martyred, he's called a martyr for the suffering he endured. Combated against the adoptionist heresies of the followers of Theodotus, whom Victor excommunicated, who were ruled by Theodotus, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce this other guy's name, Asclepius. So I shouldn't have tried. What do I have here? Saint Zephyrinus. Oh, okay, this is based. Saint Zephyrinus, I'm checking 2 sources at once, so we make sure to get you some good facts. He introduced the use of patens and chalices made of glass for the Eucharist. That's based. That's really cool. Again, a trad practice, patens. Even in the Novus Ordo, I used to be an altar boy in an old kind of Novus Ordo where we used the patens, and the Jesuits, the Jesbians, the contrarian Novus Ordo Vatican II people who hate tradition say the patens are, we don't need to use them. Well, they go all the way back to Saint Pope Zephyrinus in the 100s. Last year 100s goes all the way back to 199 AD. So they can suck on that. Pope number 16. Whoa, wait, what happened here? Pope number 16. Yeah, it goes to year 217 AD.
Possible anti-pope.
Pope Calixtus was
right before him.
Yeah, so there's the Natalius is a likely anti-pope. Remember, there's not an official printing of all of the anti-popes in the Roman Annuarium, we know there's between 30 and it could be as many as 60, because it's like, well, how big does an imposter pope have to be to count as an anti-pope? Like if I started LARPing as pope today, I was going to make a joke. I won't make it. If I started LARPing as pope today, then would I count as an anti-pope? Like, no, if I only got my wife to follow me and call me Pope Timothy or something, I probably wouldn't count. So the question is subjective. What's the threshold? What's the modicum of followers you had to have as an anti-pope to count as an anti-pope? But Natalius was a well-known one, a Roman citizen born in the Roman Empire in opposition to Zephyrinus, later reconciled and admitted he wasn't pope or whatever. Calixtus I is pope from 218 to 222. If you go to Rome, one of the coolest spots, I won't say the coolest spots, but one of the coolest spots, there's so many contenders, are the catacombs near the Appian Way. And there are two main catacombs. There's the catacombs of Calixtus I, named after this gent, and the catacombs of San Sebastiano. And so we're going to get to what those two catacombs are. But Calixtus has catacombs named after him because he was a former slave who escaped a life sentence in the mines to eventually become pope. And he has some specific connection to the catacombs there. Martyred of Greek descent. Well, they're not telling us what his deal was.
He's also the his patron of cemetery workers.
Okay,
Makes sense. Yeah.
Patron saint of cemetery footwear. Next, we have another imposter pope, Hippolytus, who, that's weird because is he really a saint? Because he reconciled with Pontian, who was two popes after that, and became a saint. In opposition to Calixtus I and Urban I, this anti-pope, Hippolytus, somehow became a saint, even though, so I don't really know. But he's not one of the popes. Number 17 is Saint Pope Urban I. The Urbanianum is one of the 7 pontifical universities in Rome, named after Urban I. He's a Roman citizen, revered as a saint in Eastern Christianity. He emerges from the anti-pope contest with Hippolytus as an important figure. He permits the church to own land and property. In other words, the church can be a principality. This sets up, again, a bulwark against another Protestant calumny against the church, and sometimes Eastern Orthodox calumny against the church. The idea that the church is not supposed to be an administrative state with an administrative head of state with the power of fee simple. They claim that was just medieval development, and it was a signal of corruption. Nonsense, because in the 220s AD, he is saying the Pope can own land and property for the first time in history, very far back, again, before the Bible was even canonized. Oh, look at all these things that go all the way back to before the period where the Bible was even canonized or Christianity was even legal. All this stuff is trad. First Pope doing Latin Mass, using patens. Women should cover their freaking heads. The church can own property and land, for heaven's sakes. All this is before Constantine, before the legalization of Christianity, before the Mass came above board, and they said Masses anywhere but the catacombs, before the Bible was canonized. So this is as traditional as it gets, not a LARP. Number 18, Urban I dies in 230 AD. And his successor, Pope number 18, is Pope Saint Pontian. Still, we haven't had a non-saint pope because most of these guys were martyrs. A Roman citizen, he'll reign for 5 years only to 235. First to abdicate due to his exile to Sardinia by Emperor Maximinus Thrax. It's a dope name. Sounds like a comic book character. The Liberian catalog recorded his exile on 28th of September 235, the earliest exact date in papal history. That's sort of dope. I like that. First pope to abdicate after being sentenced to hard labor in Sardinian mines. That's hardcore. Dostoevskian. Pope number 19 holds office starting 235 AD. Saint Antaras, Roman citizen of Greek descent, reigned for only 40 days before being martyred under Emperor Maximus Thrax. Maximus Thrax is just wiping out ninjas.
It sounds like a band name. Maximus Thrax. Sounds like something we would have listened to in the 90s.
Yeah, like thrash metal. Sounds like a thrash metal band. Maximus Thrash.
I love that.
I don't think Pope Saint Antaras loved it though, because he was martyred by the guy, but also a saint, so it's a good deal. Pope number 20. Oh, this was kind of cool though. Like Saint Antaras, Pope number 19, only reigned 40 days, but he reigned the right 40 days. So if you're only looking at the years of his interregnum, he gets to go 235 to 236. So it made it seem longer because he was Pope from like late November to late January of 236. So that's good. He divided the communities of Rome into 7 districts, each supervised by a deacon, revered by a saint as a saint in Eastern Christianity. What was that? What did you have something for me, Steph?
Oh no, just the pencil.
Saint Fabian. And that's the name of one of the parishes we attend. So we have a special connection to Fabian, a somewhat special connection to Fabian. Legend says, wait, was I doing
This is 20.
This is 20. From 236 to 250, Saint Fabian, legend says he was elected after a dove landed on his head during the selection process. And that's where the idea of the dove gets connected from Holy Spirit to Pope.
Is he responsible for the papal tiara? I'm seeing some attributes on here. The dove, papal vestments, papal tiara.
Is he? Yeah, I see. I don't see it on this site. Communities of Rome were divided into 7 districts, probably circumscribed by the 7 hills. We know Rome really well. Mm-hmm. Rome is a little big town. It's a little city, and we know it better than we know most American cities we've lived in. Pope 21 started reigning in March of 251. Pope St. Cornelius died as a martyr through extreme hardship. Sounds like there's a story there. Faced the first major anti-pope. So I guess the first major well-known anti-pope was Novatian, even though we've already counted 2 or 3, over the issue of whether to readmit Christians who had denied their faith under persecution. That's interesting. Whether or not to allow sellouts back into the faith. Okay, then Novatian, who's claiming the throne in that same period, Novatianism is the basis of his challenge to Cornelius.
But he's an anti-pope.
And he's an anti-pope. It held the strict view that refused readmission to communion of lapsi, those who lapsed, baptized Christians who had denied their faith under the threat of ritual sacrifice before these pre-Constantinian rulers. He was like hardcore. He's like, no, you're not allowed to do this. Pope St. Cornelius, the true 21st Pope, said, yes, we can readmit them. This is a sin like any other, and they can confess it and get square with the house.
Then we're on to 22.
22 begins at the death of Cornelius in 253. This is St. Lucius I, Roman citizen again. Prohibited men and women who were not related from living together. That's base. No shacking up. Even for religious service, men and women who are not married or related cannot live together. Based. Lucius is only pope for under a year, from June 253 to March of 254. He's the 22nd Roman Catholic pope. The 23rd, beginning in March of 254, is St. Stephen I, the Roman citizen, martyred by beheading.
Based.
It's based. Firmly established that baptism performed by heretics was valid if done in the name of the Trinity. This, your mom's coming into the faith. This blew her mind that even Protestant baptisms count as long as they're Trinitarian. Not like, you got to be a Christian. It's got to be Trinitarian. You can't be a Mormon. You can't be Seventh-day Adventist. You can't be Jehovah's Witness because they don't believe in the Trinity. But even the like weird sort of illiterate Christians, aka Protestants, their baptisms count even if they're done by heretics. Lucky for the Protestants, because remember, they're the arch heretics. They're called by the church arch heretics, and their baptisms count. That wouldn't be the case if not for Saint Stephen I, who reigned from 254 to 257, Pope number 23, had a reign of 3 years and 143 days. Pope number 24, Saint Sixtus II, started reigning in 257, ended reigning in 258, under 365 days, less than a year. He was a Roman citizen of Greek descent, martyred by beheading. Feast day is August 6th. Oh, we should know that. Why? Because that's our wedding anniversary, Stevie.
There you go.
So his feast day is our wedding anniversary, Sixtus, on August 6th. Beheaded while sitting in his episcopal chair during a secret cemetery service. Sounds like a story goes with that.
Again, everything's so metal in Catholicism.
It's so metal.
Yeah.
It's so based.
He's like in a cemetery.
Secret cemetery service. Like, I just want to see that without being beheaded if possible. But that's cool. That's really cool. Everything's metal, like you're always saying. Pope number 25. We made it through the first 25. Pope Dionysius. It's a cool name to Christianize the god of wine and Roman Greek bacchanals. Pope Saint Dionysius, Pope number 25, reigned from 259 to 268. We had some short pontificates leading to this one. This is almost a 10-year. This is a 9.5-year pontificate. Dionysius was a Roman citizen of Greek descent. He reorganized the Roman parishes and sent large sums of money to ransom captives from Goths in Cappadocia. So remember, the Goths and the Visigoths and the Vandals were starting to flood in. We associate this more with the 4th century and the 5th century, but they were starting to flood in earlier than historians used to tell us. Starting to flood through Rome in the 3rd century, which used to not be widely reported. Pope 26, Pope St. Felix I, was a happy guy. Felix means happy, right? 269 to 274 were the years of his reign. He sanctioned the practice of celebrating Mass on the tombs of martyrs. We also talking about this. It's like everything we've been chatting about. And it just goes back to all before the frickin' Edict of Milan, man. You just can't make the argument against Catholicism, because to be Catholic is to have a firm grasp on historicity, like G.K. Chesterton said. You go back and you're like, oh, why do you guys worship bones? Why are you guys necromancers or whatever? Why do you worship the dead? Why do you pray to the dead? It's like, look, dude, because the bones of the saints is mainly bones that are first order relics, and second order relics like their clothes, or if they're incorrupt, their flesh, are special. They're special. They're significant as philosophical residue, as artifacts of something that we know is a heavenly substance, canonized saints. And this goes all the way back to the 200s. That's really cool. St. Felix I, he's a Roman citizen, and he sanctioned the practice of celebrating Mass on the tombs of martyrs. Every altar of every church is supposed to have some sort of relic. Any basilica should have a major bone of a major saint. But all churches are supposed to have at least like second or third order relics in the altar. Pope 27 kicked off his pontificate in 275. Saint Eutychian, not Eutyches, but Eutychian. He would reign for 8 years until 283. They were getting into some of the really nasty Roman Empire emperors at this time. He personally buried 342 martyrs and decreed that only the fruits of the earth, beans and grapes, should be blessed on the altar. So that's important because, you know, in the 70s, when all the gay priests were doing the beer and pizza masses, they would literally try to do masses consecrating beer and pizza just to be disrespectful little fags. There's a tradition that also goes back before 300. The only things that can be what's the right verb? Consecrated at the altar are fruits of the earth like beans and grapes. That's interesting. Goes to, you know, the 280s. Goes back to the 280s and Pope number 27, Saint Eutychian. In 283, Saint Caius established the 7 degrees of clergy: porter, lector, exorcist, acolyte, subdeacon, deacon, priest, before one could be bishop. Very old tradition.
This is 28?
Number 28. Yeah,
Okay.
283 to 296, 12 and a half year pontificate. Roman citizen, martyred by beheading, according to legend. Also revered as a saint in Eastern Christianity. Caius, Pope number 28. Marcellinus is Pope number 29, starting in the year 296. He had an 8.5 year reign.
So short. So many of these guys had so short.
They did. Well, they just didn't live that long. Forced into slavery as a stable boy for horses by Emperor Maxentius. I did not know that. Stable boy. Can you imagine being a man and be called a stable boy, let alone you were Pope, and now you're pool boy for Maxentius? He's Pope number 29, 8.5 year pontificate, ending in 304. We're getting close to the time of Christianity's rubber stamping. Now, his papacy saw, this is in Marcellinus, the great persecution of Diocletian. So now this is something you study in church history. The great persecution of Diocletian was worse than Caligula, was worse than Nero fiddling as Trastevere burned. So the neighborhoods of Rome, if you go west of the Tiber, you're usually in the Vatican, but that's slightly north. If you're west of of Rome on a bridge due west of like Piazza Navona or the Pantheon, if you stay a little bit south, you'll be in an old Jewish ghetto, a neighborhood called Trastevere. It's a really cool area. It's cobblestone streets, which is rare in Rome. And that's the neighborhood that Nero set on fire or had set on fire and fiddled on top of the palace as it burned. It was Trastevere. It was west of the Tiber, not the main parts of Rome, east of the Tiber. Anyway, Diocletian was worse than Nero and all those guys. So bad that scriptures were burned, churches were burned, buildings were destroyed. And we had, this is one of those things you tell, I'm not a Beneplenist, but I would always say it's a possibility for guys like Ed Mazza or Patrick Coffin or Ann Barnhart. It's a possibility to have a really long layoff period between popes because look, the pontificate of Marcellinus, Pope number 29, ends in 304. And because of the Diocletian great persecution, something I love to study, I love to teach about that, they didn't have a pope for 4 years. So the church is fine without the pope sitting on the roost for 4 years. Saint Marcellus I still And sorry, I made a mistake. Marcellus the first is the one that.
That's number 30. I'll put him up on the screen.
Yeah, he's 30. He was the stable boy for Maxentius. I messed that up. So Marcellinus was from 296 to 304 under the great persecution of Diocletian. Scriptures and buildings burned. No pope from 304 to 308. St. Marcellus was forced into slavery as a stable boy for horses by Emperor Maxentius. Sorry about that mistake. So it was no longer Diocletian running the show. It was Maxentius, but he was almost as bad. It was a really rough time between 250 and the Edict of Milan, which is coming up fast in 317, right?
Real quick, what's the Edict of Milan?
Edict of Milan is the document signed by Constantine and his rival, who he ended up defeating, the Eastern Emperor, who he defeated at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. But he signed a treaty with him that they would not persecute Christians. I'll remember his rival's name in a second, but they signed that in 317, and that made Christianity legal, and not only legal, but kind of fashionable in Rome. And Constantine's mother, Helen, was a Christian. She built the oldest church in Rome.
We lived right next to that.
Yeah. Right. He built one, and she built the other. The two churches are San Giovanni, and Santa Croce, two of the 7 big basilicas of Rome, and they face each other. I used to train. I ran the Roman marathon, and I trained for the marathon between those two churches. Really cool. They faced each other. It's a big ovular-shaped park. It was one of my favorite parts of Rome, right near Porta Maggiore. Really cool place. And so Constantine and his mother built those two oldest churches of Rome, arguably my 2 favorite churches in Rome. And they all did that because they'd legalized Christianity in 317. So we're coming to Pope number 31, St. Eusebius, important in a lot of church history discussions. I'm going back and forth between 2 documents. He was Pope number 31, another saint from 309 to 310, only a 1 year, 121-day pontificate, reigned for 4 months only.
Yeah, from April.
Before his exile. He was still Pope, but he was exiled to Sicily by the emperor. So he got exiled, was still Pope, and then they were like, he either got killed or he died in exile. And eventually the church was like, we need to get some new FBI guys, right? Like they say in Diary, we need to get a new Pope. Also a saint, Pope number 31, Saint Pope number 31, because before the Edict of Milan turns the whole tide, all of these guys were like the bravest men on earth to be the leader of the church on earth. Not true anymore. I'm not sure what Pope Leo's got under the hood. I haven't really liked it so far when we get a look, but I don't think, even if he turns out okay, I don't think he's the bravest man on earth. You had to be the bravest man on earth to be the Pope before the Edict of Milan. Pope number 32, who took the reins in 311 and would be Pope until 314, is Pope Miltiades, a Roman citizen of Berber descent. The people who saw the victory of so he was the Pope who saw the victory of Constantine and the legalization of Christianity. Sorry, so it's 313, right? Would you double check?
Yeah, somebody in chat was saying it's 313.
313, not 317. I always call it 317 and it's 313, so that's retarded. So Miltiades, or Melchiades is another name for him, was most important for a relatively passive agency. He was just the Pope who reigned, Pope number 32. He was also a saint, so I have no doubt that he was good. And he was Pope. He began being Pope before the Edict of Milan. But, that's the main thing he did. He's known as the Pope who presided over the Lateran Council of 313, which occurred right after the Edict of Milan. Here, let's look at what the Lateran Council did. Not a real ecumenical council. We wouldn't have another council for about 20 years which would be Nicaea. The Lateran councils were ecclesiastical councils, or just synods of the Catholic Church held at Rome in the Lateran Palace next to, that's San Giovanni. That's the one we're talking about. That's the palace that would be built and completed by Constantine. Ranking as a papal cathedral, this became a much favored place of assembly for ecclesiastical councils, both in antiquity and during the Middle Ages. That becomes San Giovanni, the Lateran Council. So they held this, I think, right after the Edict of Milan, signed between Constantine and Licinius. Sorry, that was his rival. The Edict of Milan was the February the 13th, 313 agreement to treat Christians benevolently within the Roman Empire. Western Roman Emperor Constantine I and Eastern Emperor or Emperor Licinius, who controlled the Balkans in the east, met in Mediolanum in Milan, and among other things, agreed to change policies toward Christians following the Edict of Toleration issued by Emperor Galerius 2 years earlier in Serdica. The Edict of Milan gave Christianity legal status and a reprieve from the persecution, but did not make it the state church of the Roman Empire, which occurred in 380 AD with the Edict of Thessalonica, when Nicene Christianity received normative status. So it only took 67 years to move from this is legal to this is normative, this is the popular thing, because Christianity is so compelling. Once you make it legal, once the pagans allow it, everyone's going to become Christian. Everyone's going to say, wow, these first 32 popes who lived before the Edict of Milan were almost all martyred. All of them were saints, and they were all brave because of the risks they were taking. So at some point, Licinius stopped following the Edict of Milan, and Constantine ends up killing him. Right? That's where you get the conquer under this sign thing, and he sees the cross in the sky, Battle of Milvian Bridge, but that's later. Okay, Pope number 33, Pope Sylvester the First, becomes Pope in 314 and is Pope for 21 years. And that's weird. I wonder why Pope St. Miltiades died. Do you have anything on that? I wonder what killed him. He was Pope for a short time, even though it became legal, so he wasn't, I don't think he was martyred. He presided over, maybe he just died. Pope St. Sylvester was number 33. He was a Roman citizen. He was the first pope to see the completion of the original St. Peter's Basilica, not in the same place, and the Basilica of St. John Lateran, which is what's called the Lateran Palace, San Giovanni, which is what we were talking about. It was started by Constantine, but he saw it completed, Pope St. Sylvester. This brings us to the year 336 and Pope number 34. Still not a non-saint pope in the lot, St. Mark. St. Mark instituted the wearing of the pallium, a woolen vestment still worn by archbishops today. Again, super traditional. St. Mark was a Roman citizen, compiled stories of martyrs and bishops before his time, may have founded two churches in the area of Rome, Church of San Marco and a church at the catacomb, a minor catacomb, the Catacomb of Balbino. We never went there. It's just a cemetery, but it's partly underground, partly above ground. He was only pope for 263 days. In February of 337, Pope number 35, St. Julius I, becomes pope. He'll reign for 15 years. He is a Roman citizen. He was involved in the Arian controversy, okay, because the years spanning his pontificate are 337 to 352. Pope Julius I is based, you probably recognize him. He was a big supporter of St. Athanasius. He was the pope that remember, all the ecumenical councils, the first ones, were called by the emperor, not by the pope. But he was the pope who supported the first ecumenical council at Nicaea, I should say. And he was a big supporter of Athanasius, who was fighting against Arius. The first council of Nicaea was held in, I should know this, became significant enough that the Emperor Constantine in 325 called an assembly of bishops, First Council of Nicaea. And Nicaea is like, remember, the first thing Constantine did when he was pope, one of the first things he did is he moved the capital of Rome after he defeated the Eastern Empire and consolidated all of Rome, east and west. He killed Licinius. He moves the capital of the Roman Empire from Rome to Constantinople, or to, you know, what modern day Istanbul, what he would call Constantine City, which is a bold move to be like, I'm making a new city called Timothy City. Constantinople, in Asia Minor. Nicaea is about 75 miles away from Constantinople, just so you have a sense of it. And by 325, he's like, we need a council and this is the first ecumenical council, to defeat the Arians and the Arian heresy.
What was that again?
What's that?
Arian.
Oh, the Trinitarian crisis, that Christ wasn't fully divine, so not in the Trinity. You know, he was godlike, but he wasn't God, basically. And Pope number
35, right?
35 is Julius I, who fixed the celebration of Christmas on December 25th. Was a big supporter of Athanasius, because even after the Council of Nicaea ended, who still reigned? The Arians. For the next 150 years, the Arians still reigned, and lots of bishops still bowed to them. And so guys like St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, and Athanasius were the heroes of Nicaea and needed support even after the council ended, maybe especially more after the council ended. Julius reigned for 15 years. Pope number 36, Liberius. You probably know that name. He's the first Roman Catholic pope who was not a saint, which is a dubious distinction. The first Roman Catholic pope not to be a saint. That sucks, to be the one to break that chain. First pope not to be canonized. He reigns from 352 to 366. Banished by the Arian-leaning Emperor Constantius II, and later yielded to him. So Liberius buckled. He folded like an umbrella. And he's actually known as a saint in Eastern Christianity, but he's not for us Roman Catholics. You have another major anti-pope, Felix II, that arose in opposition to Liberius, installed by Arian-leaning Emperor Constantius II. So it's weird because Liberius opposed Arianism, was punished by the Arian-leaning emperor, but ended up himself, Liberius, sort of truckling to the forces, but was still really pope. The anti-pope installed by Liberius was Felix II, but he's not a real pope. I'm not going to go through all the anti-popes. That's too much work.
I'm just going to put the next pope up.
Yeah, so that would be 366, Pope Saint Damasus I. Now, this guy's based. He's the one that, I know a lot about Damasus I. He's the one that commissioned Jerome to translate the Bible into the Vulgate. We already had the Mass in Latin, right? 200 years before. Now we have the Bible being written, you know, the Vulgate Clementine. And he's like, hey, Jerome, can you do this? Jerome was the most knowledgeable scripture scholar in the world, maybe ever, because he was commissioned by Damasus I to do it. The first pope from modern-day Portugal. Wonder how close he lived to Fatima. He's the patron of Jerome, commissioned the Vulgate translation, pope during the First Council of Constantinople, you know, the Second Ecumenical Council in 381, and the Council of Rome, not an ecumenical council. That's monophysitism that he, Saint Damasus, was, you know, It's kind of the opposite extreme. Monophysitism is like, there's this mystery of the Trinity. The mystery of the Trinity encapsulates the mystery of the hypostatic union. Jesus is fully God-natured and man-natured. How could it be 200%? Well, the Arians at Nicaea and after Nicaea were like, well, he's got to be more man than God. The Monophysites basically said the opposite. He's got to be more God than man. The people were struggling with the he's 200%. He has two full natures thing. So the Monophysites were the bad guys of the Council of Constantinople. A second ecumenical council, St. Damasus, presided over that. He's the first pope, Damasus, to be the official head of the church after Emperor Gratian abdicated the title of Pontifex Maximus, which means the greatest bridge maker. And now it's no longer applied to the emperor, like Gratian used it for himself. Now Pontifex Maximus is, if you're on Twitter, you know, the title of the pope. The bridge between heaven and earth is not the emperor, conceptually. That's paganism. It's the pope. It's important conceptually. So Damasus is a big guy. Pope 38 from 384 to 399. Another saint. We've only had one non-saint even in this time.
Poor guy.
Liberius sucks. Liberius sucks. Number 36. Only one. Damasus, number 37 is a saint. Saint Siricius is Pope 38 from 384 to 399. The first to officially use the title Pope. And again, this comes from the Greek papas or from the Latin that we just borrowed, Pontifex Maximus. So Papa and Pontifex, we call it Pope in its modern sense. That's Pope 38, also a saint. 14-year reign, almost like 14 years and 344-day reign. He's a Roman citizen. Famous letters were focused particularly on religious discipline, include decisions on baptism, consecration, ordination, penance, continence. Remember, penance wasn't yet a single sacrament until the monk, what's his name? I'm forgetting the monk who developed it. I'll remember in a second. His Siricius's important decretal of 386 commanded celibacy for priests, was the first ever decree on this subject. It becomes officialized centuries later, but it's the first decretal in 386 that priests need to be celibate, which is based. Also a saint. Pope number 39 takes office in late 399. Will be pope for about 2 years. Saint Anastasius the First, also a saint. He's a Roman citizen. Instructed priests to stand and bow their heads as they read from the Gospels. Condemned the writings of Origen. Remember Origenism, famous early Christian theologian, as heterodox. Now, Origen writes a lot of good stuff. Why was Origen condemned? Basically, he believed what Bishop Robert Barron believes, right? Origen believed there was no hell, or there's a reasonable hope there is no hell. I mean, there are distinctions because Bishop Barron has made it very intentional that there are some marked distinctions, but I'd say they're largely a distinction without a conceptual difference. That's Saint Anastasius. He wanted priests to stand and bow their heads as they read from the gospel, which is a disciplinary thing. Pope number 40, Innocent the First, also a saint, took office in 401, held office for 15 years. It should be 16 years, right?
I had 401 to 417.
Yeah, I had that too. 401 to 417. So that's, yeah, whatever. Better part of 16 years. He's a Roman citizen. His feast day is March the 12th. Rome was sacked by Visigoths under King Alaric I. This is a big, important red letter date when the Visigoths come in because they re-bring the tide of Arianism. Because they're like pagans, they have multiple gods, so Arianism makes more sense to them than monotheism with a three-part a three-person god. They're like, no. So they the Visigoths bring back Arianism. Not that it had ever been fully gone. And King Alaric was like the barbarian Visigoth king that sacked Rome, knocked all the noses off the statues, took the marble off the Colosseum. And Pope Innocent I was sort of the sitting pope when the Visigoths sacked Rome in 410. That was a big deal. And he was a saint. He was very brave by all accounts. Pope 41 became pope on March 18th. A lot of stuff's happening on March 18th. That's my dad's birthday. From 417 to 418, only about a year and a half pontificate. Saint Zosimus, like the elder Zosima. We were just talking about Brothers Karamazov after you fell asleep last night, Steffi. The elder Zosima is Alyosha, the Christ. His mentor is the elder Zosima, elder Russian Orthodox priest. Alyosha wants to be like the elder Zosima, and Saint Zosimus is Pope number 41. A controversial figure who struggled with the Pelagian heresy and jurisdictional rights in Gaul. Interesting. Pelagianism is the idea of unmediated grace, the idea that you could basically build a stairway to heaven without grace from God. You could do good works without faith alone to get to heaven. And it gets addressed, among other things, at the fourth, is it the fourth or the third? I think at Chalcedon, the Fourth Ecumenical Council. So there are two things addressed at the Fourth Council, and this is one. And Zosimus, some saw him as weak on Pelagianism. I'm kind of pulling a lot together, though. So we had an anti-pope here because of the end of Zosimus' pontificate. Zosimus was still a saint, though. So Eulalius opposes in the election. It wasn't a conclave yet. Wouldn't be a conclave for centuries. Opposes the nomination of Boniface I. So he's an anti-pope, but a completely false anti-pope. Boniface I, also a saint, becomes pope for about 4 years, from 418 to 422. Boniface election caused a dust-up, a riot that required the emperor to intervene to settle the papacy, 418 to 422. And bear in mind that there's an anti-papacy happening then, partly connected to that riot, that controversy. Pope number 43, 9-year, basically a 10-year pontificate from 422 to 432, is Pope Saint Celestine. Now, he's important. Talked about him a lot when I was debating with Jay, because he is the Pope that was at Ephesus, the Third Ecumenical Council, being requested by one of the Eastern patriarchs, the Patriarch of Antioch, I think, to excommunicate the Patriarch of Constantinople, Nestorius, for Nestorianism. So literally in the Pentarchy, the early hierarchy was just the five patriarchs: Rome, Constantinople, Jerusalem, Antioch, Alexandria. Rome's in charge. Rome's the one that they would say, hey, could you fire this guy because he's the Pope? Celestine was requested by other of the Pentarchs to get rid of the number 2. And he was like, yes, this is correct. No one said, why are you doing this? They understood the Pope has a universal jurisdiction. It's not just a honorific, the way
try that in real life, like just a regular guy walk into Target and just fire.
Start firing employees.
Yeah, and see if that works.
Yeah. It'd be like, well, I'm the first among equals. The people are like, that's right, GTFO. You're the first customer among equals, but you could GTFO. So Celestine entertains this nearly 10-year papacy. He's revered as a saint in Eastern Christianity, even though he kind of went against them. He had a feast day of April the 8th, Pope during the Council of Ephesus, number 3. He was the one that at the Council of Ephesus was required or requested to excommunicate Nestorius, which he helped to do. He wanted to involve everyone. He also sent St. Patrick to Ireland to begin the island's conversion, which is based. The story of St. Patrick is incredibly based. And Celestine's just a really important figure in early Christianity because he's the guy at the Third Ecumenical Council of Ephesus. And I just kept throwing this at, my friend Jay. I'm like, yo, man, how are you saying that the Pope is just first among equals, no real authority, only symbolic authority, only honorary authority, if all the other patriarchs are requesting him to do the firing, the excommunicating of this second highest guy in the church, Nestorius? Pope 44 is Pope Saint Sixtus III, 8-year, 18-day pontificate from 432 to 440. What did he do? He rebuilt the Basilica of St. Mary Major, Santa Maria Maggiore, which again was about a 16-minute walk from our house. All of these basilicas, it was just due north of our house. The other ones were west or northwest. Amazing. I used to sing at an open mic with some British guys called the Fiddler's Elbow right near St. Mary Major. If you've ever spent time in Rome, a lot of British, Irish, and Americans who play music hang out at this place called the Fiddler's Elbow. Me and my buddy Mike, British guy, and he had a couple crazy British friends. We did a killer a cappella with guitar version of Johnny Cash's rendition of Hurt. It like brought the house down in an open mic. It was really good. You had to be there. But that's near, it's like literally a stone's throw away from St. Mary Major. Sixtus III rebuilt St. Mary Major. Beautiful, beautiful basilica. One of the 7 major ones. It's cool how the 7 major basilicas are all had already been erected by, the 300s, 400s. Okay, so once again, we're on Pope 44. Man, I got to speed up. And only one of them is not a saint. Now, the next guy, we have the lion, Saint Leo the Great, Leo Magnus. Obviously, Leo the First, Leo the Great is a saint. So 44 of these first guys are saints. I did not know it was this many of the first 45. Let's see if we can make it to 50 with only, St. Gelasius. No. So number 50 is only the second pope. So in the first 49 pontificates, only one is a non-saint because they're all martyrs or ballers, just brave. Pope St. Leo the Great, 440 to 461, famously met, can you imagine this? He met Attila the Hun outside Rome and persuaded him not to sack the city. What a baller. He convinced Attila the Hun to turn back his invasion of Italy. He convinced the Vandals to spare the lives of the citizenry of Rome during their sack of the city. What a mensch. He wrote the tome based also, I forgot, he did so much. He wrote the tome, which was instrumental in the Council of Chalcedon, so the Fourth Ecumenical Council. So he wrote the tome, which also proves that the Eastern Church, the Eastern lung of the Church, acknowledged the Pope was the guy. You have to know about the tome. It was also key, the tome, in defining the hypostatic union, Christ's 2 natures. Pope Leo I is him. He's the guy. He's also revered as a saint in Eastern Christianity, which is kind of funny because he did all these things for the Western Church, establishing that the pontiff is the guy. I could go on for a long time about Leo the Great, but I want to go have a sandwich. I want to be done before hours. Pope 46, also a saint, Saint Hilarious. Not particularly funny, but he's still Saint Hilarious. He founded the state archives and the libraries of the Lateran. The main libraries until a few hundred years ago were not the Vatican libraries at St. Peter's, but the Lateran libraries at San Giovanni, built by Constantine, Lateran Palace. Also, the Scala Sanctae, the wooden stairs Jesus rose to visit with Pontius Pilate are there across the mini street in the Lateran Palace archives. It's amazing. So Hilarious was Pope from 461 to 468. He was Pope number 46. Pontificate number 47 from 468 to 483, about 15 years, was Saint Simplicius. Reigned during the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476. The collapse of the Western Empire and subsequent overtaking of Rome and Italy in general by King Odoacer. So all of the tribal Germanic kings took over from Odoacer to Otto the Great until you had the Carolingians, 300 years later, almost to the exact year, 300 years later, you had Charles Martel, Pepin the Short, and of course, Charlemagne, the great man, got stuff cooking again in the western part of the empire. You really just had the decline of the Roman Empire. St. Augustine's writing about it, and Germanic tribalism taking over. Still a saint, Saint Simplicius, Pope 48 from 483 to 492 was Saint Felix III, also a saint. First pope to come from a senatorial family. He was the great-great-grandfather of Gregory the Great. That's amazing. That's amazing. So Saint Felix III, I didn't know that. Saint Felix III came from the Senate, and he was the great-great-grandfather of Gregory the Great, who's coming up. I love Gregory the Great, even more than Leo the Great. I love Gregory the Great, who started Gregorian chant and reformed the church, which needed reform even early on. But anyway, Saint Felix III, Pope 48, reigned 9 years, just under 9 years. He was a subject of the Kingdom of Italy, sometimes called Felix II. That's confusing. Great-great-grandfather of Gregory I. Pope number 49, from 492 to 496, Saint Gelasius I. Important figure. Roman citizen of Berber descent, later a subject of the Ostrogothic Kingdom of Italy. Last pope to have been born on the continent of Africa. See if Cardinal Sarah ever has anything to say about that. Probably not. He defined, this is key. He defined the two swords doctrine, the separation of power of church and state. Doesn't do what you think it does. That's Gelasius. He defined the two swords doctrine, which I'm always citing. It doesn't mean what you think. But again, two swords goes back to the 5th century, 492 to 496. He's the first pope, Gelasius, by the way, to be called the Vicar of Christ, Vicarius Christi. Okay, so we got through 49 popes, and only number 36 was not a saint. Now we get to Pope number 50. Anastasius II is only the second non-sainted pope. Roman citizen of Greek descent, tried to heal a schism with the East because there was this mini schism. And Dante ends up placing Anastasius II in hell in the Commedia because Dante didn't think he should have tried to heal this schism with the East. Oh. And a lot of Catholics agreed. This is a common view.
Oh yeah,
don't sell out, bro. And this is probably why he's not a saint.
Wait, is he the one that was upside down in the Inferno?
No, I don't think so.
Popes? Oh, he's in the 6th circle of hell. So he's
yeah, why is he in? Well, I mean,
interesting.
Dante didn't like
the Inferno.
So there was the Great Schism in 1054, obviously, and that's the first time that the Eastern Orthodox ever stuck to a rejection of the Pope. But they were the Eastern lung of the church, the Greek Turkish part of the church. They always resented that we had the number one see who had a universal jurisdiction. And they would always fall into mini schism as under Anastasius II. But then come out of it, steer out of a, a slip slide. And the only time they didn't do that was in 1054. That was permanent. Pope number 51, Saint Symmachus, Pope from 498 to 514, basically 16-year pontificate, was a Roman citizen, later a subject of the Ostrogothic Kingdom of Italy. Another saint. So we're back to all of these popes are saints. Saint Symmachus expelled all Manichaeans from Rome and burned their books. Based. Manichaeans were those Gnostics who believed that the body was bad. Saint Augustine was a Manichaean, which kind of led him to Neoplatonism, which kind of led him back to Ambrose. What
was it, that the body was evil?
Yeah, it's body hatred. They believe in a semi-Neoplatonic form of evil being co-substantial with good, and just wacky stuff. Saint Augustine was a Manichaean until he met the head of Manichaeanism on earth, and he was like, literally, he writes something like, this guy was a moron. Then he's like, my mother introduced me to Ambrose, and that was the smartest dude ever. I'm just going to go talk to him. That's what led Augustine back to the faith, was seeing how dumb secular intellectual heroes are. They're just dumb as fuck. Like if you're being honest, dumb secular leaders like academicians, your secular professors are the dumbest guys ever, and they think they're smart. And this is what St. Augustine was learning as he was coming back into the church. So St. Symmachus was based. He burned all the books by the Manichees, and he expelled them from Rome, which is based. Now, Pope number 52, and you have a little anti-pope there in opposition to Symmachus, elected the same day as Symmachus, anti-pope, King Theodoric, another semi-Germanic guy, maybe Gaulish, settled in favor of his adversary, took control of Rome in 501 and remained pope until he died in 506. But that's Laurentius. He's an anti-pope. The real guy from 498 to 514 was St. Symmachus. 514, St. Hormisdas takes over and has a 9-year pontificate. Now, the formula of Hormisdas is something that also comes up in debates, many debates with Eastern Orthodox. It's really important. St. Hormisdas is the second pope, father of Pope Silverius. How does that work? Well, he's the father of Pope Silverius and author of the formula of Hormisdas.
Before becoming a deacon, he was married and had a son.
Okay, he was laying pipe before he was a deacon. He was laying pipe. Okay.
Born on my birthday, or his pontificate started on my birthday.
Okay, and but when his pontificate began here, his marriage and his first 8 kids were born. That's just weird.
And his feast day is our anniversary.
Oh, based.
Like, I don't know why we're so tied to this guy.
Why are we tied to this guy? Well, the formula of Hormisdas ended the Acacian schism, the mini schism, when these Eastern Christians would fall into schism because they didn't like that the Pope was in charge. They were bitches about this. And he ended it with the formula of Hormisdas, and they all signed it. Like, yeah, you're totally in charge. If you guys think that Eastern Orthodoxy is cooler than Protestantism, you're right. It's way cooler. It's way more traditional. But if you think that the Eastern Orthodox have more arguments against the pontificate than the Protestants, then you're retarded. They don't. There are so many like real proof texts, real smoking guns that just prove how retarded it is that for 1,000 years they accepted all of these popes, appealing to them, asking them for excommunications of number 2 in the church, signing the formula of Hormisdas, where they're like, we're right, you're wrong. We're ugly, you're handsome, Pope. We smell bad, you smell very good. They would sign this. This is like halfway between Jesus and the Great Schism. This is literally like in the middle of the 500s, halfway to 1054. Like literally almost exactly halfway. It's like 523. And this ends the little mini schism they have. They would crash out and then they'd come back. Okay.
53.
Pope 53. Pontificate lasts almost 3 years, 523 to 526. St. John the First, another saint. We only have had two, only had those two popes that weren't saints so far. St. John the First, a Roman citizen, later a subject of the Ostrogothic kingdom of Italy. First pope to travel to Constantinople to visit the Byzantine emperor. Remember, the first thing Constantine did when he unified Western and Eastern Roman empires was he moved the capital city from Rome to Turkey, named it after himself, Constantinople. Second thing he did was legalize Christianity. No pope had ever been over there to the eastern heart of Christendom, Constantinople or Istanbul, Turkey today. What's the other name for it? What's the other name for Constantinople? Oh, Byzantium. Byzantium. He was the first pope to go visit his number two over there, because the number two in the church then wasn't the Cardinal Secretary of State, Stato, or wasn't the Cardinal Secretary of the CDF, Doctrina. You know, they call him Stato and Doctrina. Those are kind of his number two administrator and his number two doctrinal guy. But back in the day, the number two was just in the Pentarchy, it was just the Patriarch of Constantinople, and he was the first pope to go visit him. And I guess that's the best thing he did. But also a saint. Cool name. It's my middle name. I love John's. Number 54. Also a saint. Felix IV, pope from 526 to 530. 4-year pontificate. Attempted to name his own successor by handing over his pallium while he was still alive. That's bold. And people are like, bro, no, this is not the way. Did he do anything good, though? I hate it when they only tell me a bad thing about him, but he's a saint. Sometimes they call him Felix III. That's weird. He's Felix IV.
During his pontificate, an imperial edict was passed granting that cases against clergy should be dealt with by the Pope or a designated ecclesiastical court. Okay,
that's something. Also, he constructed Santi Cosma e Damiano, the other really, really cool church. Franciscan Third Order Regular. It's accessible through the Roman Forum and the Foro Imperiale.
He also defined church teaching on grace and free will in response to request of Faustus of Riez in Gaul.
And that's like the one doctrine that they're never gonna exactly finally finish. But I love the buildings of Cosma and Damiano. Aren't they kind of underground? They're just amazing churches in the Forum there. I would cross the Forum every day to get to the Greg. Okay, so that's Felix IV, also a saint. He's Pope number 54. Boniface II, Pope number 55, and only the third Pope in the first 55 not to be a saint. Pope from 530 to 532. He was an Ostrogoth. He's the first Germanic Pope. You see, they've been sort of surrounded by these Germans for the last 100 years. He's the first Germanic Pope. Eventually they get a guy, not a saint, just saying. Subject of the Kingdom of Italy, changed the method of numbering the years in the Julian calendar from the Anno Martyrum to the Anno Domini, so that he changed the whole calendar. Wait, where did I go?
His most notable act, by the way, was confirming the decisions of the Council of Origin, teaching that grace is always necessary to obtain salvation.
Right. And that's as far as the church is really willing to stipulate, to specify on grace. It's kind of like we don't want to lean too far into Molinism, don't want to lean too far into Boniesianism. So basically what they're willing to say then is what they're willing to officially say now. I know that makes people mad. There are going to be people getting mad in the comments, but Pope 56 is John II from 533 to 535. Also not a saint. So now we have 4 popes who are non-saints. The first pope to change his name upon election. This is the first time that we had a pope change his name. So all of those names were Christian birth names. I didn't know that. That's interesting. So everyone from Pope 1 to Pope 55 did not change his name. John started this tradition. He changed his name to John II upon election. He was born Mercurius, and he was just like, I'm too mercurial for that. I don't like my name. So he's John II, shortly after John I. Only 3 popes after John I. He wanted to be John II, but not a saint. He had first pope to change his name. He didn't like his name because it was, I made the mercuriality joke. He said it was associated with the Roman god Mercury, and that's not good. So that's interesting. Based. Pope number 57, 535 to 536, about exactly 1 year pontificate. Saint Agapetus I. I don't know this guy. Agapetus the first pawned the sacred vessels of the church to fund a diplomatic mission to stop a war. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. Sounds kind of tacky. Also,
pawning was a thing back then.
I didn't know you could pawn. Like, that just seems anachronistic. Pope 58, less than a year. Saint Silverius, the son of Hormuzdas.
Yeah, he was the one that was a deacon before.
Right.
His dad was a deacon before.
His dad was a deacon laying pipe.
58?
This is Pope 58, Saint Silverius. So what do we have? I'm just keeping a running count. I'm just going to keep a little tally mark. So we have 4 non-saint popes by 58. Saint Silverius, son of handsome, charming man, Hormuzdas, also pope. A father-son pope combination. I didn't even know we had that.
Yeah, that's like the president. It's like
Yeah.
Your dad is the president.
Or like LeBron and Bronny.
Yeah.
Except not little bitches. Sorry. Saint Silverius.
With all due respect.
Saint Silverius. Well, let's see what else we have here. He was forced to abdicate and he died of starvation on a desert island. So things ended horrible for him. Super horrible for him.
Gosh.
But he was a saint, so that's cool.
All right, 59.
Vigilius. So now we have Pope number 5, who's not a saint. Okay, now it's picking up, because after Vigilius, and this is another one that comes up in debates with the Eastern Orthodox, because he's the Pope during the Second Council of Constantinople. So hot topic with them, and I know what he did from these debates. He accompanied the Emperor of Constantinople, but was practically held hostage there for 7 years. And they forced him to sign this thing saying he didn't have this power. He's forced to sign it. And the Eastern Orthodox will be like, he signed it. It's like, you forced him to sign that popes have less power than you wanted them to. So this was always an issue. He's of Roman ethnicity. He's only pope for 18 years, but he was essentially a hostage for 7 of them. He was the pope during the Second Council of Constantinople, which is the 5th ecumenical council, recognized by both the Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox. And they say that he made this major admission. Now, Pelagius I, associated with Pelagianism, is the 60th pope from 556 to 561, was of Roman ethnicity, credited with the construction of the Basilica of the Sancti Apostoli. Let's see. Used his own personal fortune to aid a Rome devastated by the Gothic Wars. So I guess he had a fortune. He's not a saint. He follows Vigilius. Maybe it's Pelagius too. Did you want to see if Pelagius I is the one that gives his name to a Pelagianism?
I'm not seeing that right on this one.
If you couple, we just have to run faster. If you couple this show with like a church history class, it works really well, because there's a lot of stuff going on in the background that contextualizes it all. But yeah, we have that church history class on timothyjgordon.com, and we've made it not completely free, but cheap, right? Pope number 61, also not a saint. This is Pope number 7 that's not a saint. John III, Pope for 12 years from 561 to 574. He was a Roman citizen, was of Roman ethnicity, second Pope not to use his personal name. So I guess they didn't all do it immediately. Now it's become complete tradition. He lived in the catacombs. That's crazy. Why would you live in the catacombs? I've been to the catacombs. It's crazy. For a time to avoid civil unrest in the city. Maybe he only lived there for a little bit. Maybe he stayed overnight there once. That's crazy to live in the catacombs. Pope number 62, Benedict I. Not a saint. 4-year pontificate from 575 to 579. He was of Roman ethnicity. Died of grief during a Lombard siege of Rome while trying to organize relief. How do you die of grief? I didn't know that was a thing. Thought that was just a turn of phrase. Pope number 63, Pelagius II, 10-year pontifical reign. Now he's the 9th pope not to be a saint. He's a Romanized Ostrogoth, the subject of the Kingdom of Italy. Later an Eastern Roman citizen. He ordered the construction of the Basilica of San Lorenzo fuori le Mura. That was our basilica. We lived in the San Lorenzo neighborhood. So wasn't my favorite of the 7 basilicas, but that was our neighborhood was named after San Lorenzo. We lived in the San Lorenzo neighborhood. So that's cool. Pelagius II died during a plague outbreak in Rome caused by the flooding of the Tiber. That's gross. Pope 64, we come to Saint Gregory the Great, the Gregorian reforms. He's Pope 64, another saint, of course, 13-year pontificate. He was a Roman citizen after he was subject of Italy. Great-great-grandson of Felix III, first pope to employ the titles Pontifex Maximus and Servus Servorum Dei, servant of the servants of God. Established the Gregorian chant, which he did so much, but the Gregorian reforms included the Gregorian chant, which is the most beautiful music on earth. Also revered as a saint in Eastern Christianity, known as the father of Christian worship. Basically, he gave us the first form of the TLM, known as Saint Gregory the Dialogist in Eastern Orthodoxy. He's just so based. A former monk who standardized the Gregorian chant. So he was our first monk pope in the strict sense of the term. Gave us more or less the TLM, the proto-TLM, gave us Gregorian chants. Reformed the church. It was a time of Rome collapsing and some sort of Christian decadence and decay. And he reformed the church and made it great again. Gregory the Great. Pope. Was it Gregory the Great or Leo the Great that said, convert Jews by sweetness of preaching? Can you look that up? Gregory the Great, Leo the Great.
We're on to 65.
Pope 65, Sabinian. Not a saint. So this is number 10 non-saint pope. Out of 65, 55 out of the first 65. So Pope Sabinian from 604 to 606 introduced the use of church bells to mark the hours of prayer. That's based. So Catholic. Roman popes were all controlled by the Roman Empire after Sabinian, which is a major problem with the Eastern Orthodox, right? Is they're all controlled by the empire, the Eastern empires, the Eastern emperors. But for about the next 2 centuries after Sabinian, he's a Roman ethnicity guy who for the next 2 centuries, the Roman popes were all controlled by the Eastern Roman Empire. A bigger problem for them than us. Also not a saint. Pope number 66, Boniface III, also not a saint. Reigned from 607 to 607, from second month of the year to the last month of the year, 266-day reign. Boniface III, he was of Greek descent. Obtained a decree from the emperor acknowledging that the Bishop of Rome is the head of all churches. I wonder what that letter says. That seems more important. I've never even heard that. Boniface III. Again.
It ensured the title of universal bishop belonged exclusively to the Bishop of Rome and effectively ended the attempt by the Patriarch, is it Syriacus, I'm going to butcher that name, of Constantinople to establish himself as universal bishop.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So the emperor, that's big. I thought, and Boniface is not a saint, obtained a decree from the emperor acknowledging the Bishop of Rome as head of all churches. That's big. That's really big time. This is Pope number 66.
Yeah.
Head of all churches. What else did you say? That's kind of base.
This ensured that the title of universal bishop belonged exclusively to the Bishop of Rome.
Universal bishop. Universal
and effectively
jurisdiction.
Ended the attempt by the Patriarch of Constantinople to establish.
The Constantinopolians were always trying to usurp authority. It's so clear. This is what, when I have all the ortho bros in the chat, I love you guys. We get along great. I like the manliness. You guys tend to be cool dudes, but like, this is why I'm Catholic. Like, why are you Catholic? Hasn't Vatican II presented your church some problems? Yeah, but not as fundamental as not having a pope, which you acknowledged you needed for the last 1,000 years. It's a bigger problem. Wow, Boniface III, that really surprised me. That I thought he was going to be a boring one. 1 year papacy. Boniface IV is next. He is a saint. So the non-saint pope count doesn't continue with Boniface IV. He's pope for 6 years, from 608 to 615. That's not 6 years. What the hell? That's 608 to 615. So yeah, I guess that's 6.5 years. Okay. Subject of the Kingdom of Italy, was of Roman ethnicity, member of the Order of St. Benedict. So he's got monk connections, monastic connections. First pope to bear the same name as his immediate predecessor. Oh, so that was the first time you went Boniface III, Boniface IV. John Paul the First, John Paul II kind of thing. Okay, is there anything cooler about him? I mean, Boniface III is really important for our dialogue with Eastern Orthodox. I did not know about that. But Boniface IV converted the Pantheon from pagan temple into Christian church. We love the Pantheon, right? The temple to all the pagan gods. We just took it and we shit on all their fake gods, threw them out in the dumpster in a heap, brought in all of our saints. So that's amazing. And the Oculus, you go in there when it's raining near Piazza Navona, and it's just a good time. Bring a gelato. Imagine desecrating pagan gods. It's just a good time. Good time had by all. Pope 68, Saint Adeodatus. Saint Adeodatus had a 3-year pontificate from 615 to 618. Roman ethnicity, sometimes called Deus Dedit. First pope to use lead seals on papal documents. Okay, that's not that cool. But because of the lead seals, they became called papal bulls. So that's more interesting. Okay, Adeodatus, Saint Adeodatus. Use lead seals, bullae. That's where the term papal bull came from. I always wondered what bulls and bears. Okay, so the pope who invented papal bulls is Saint Adeodatus. That's kind of cool. Something. Pope 69, Boniface V, basically a 6-year pontificate from 619 to 625. Eastern Roman citizen, Roman ethnicity. Established the right of sanctuary where fugitives could find safety in a church. Boniface V. Oh, and he's a non-saint. There's 12 non-saints by Boniface V. Pope 70, Honorius I, big, important papacy, basically a 13-year papacy from 625 to 638, was of Roman ethnicity, named a heretic, and anathematized by the Third Council of Constantinople. No, he's not a saint. Did I say he's a saint? Of course, Honorius I isn't a saint. He's named a heretic and anathematized by the Third Council of Constantinople. And again, we we anathematized him and called him a heretic in 680, 42 years after his pontificate ended. And Protestants and Orthodox will try to embarrass us with, what if Francis was a heretic? It's like, well, the church announced he was a heretic and anathematized after his pontificate. Like, why would that end the church? We were admitting we're doing this in 680. You have to see Honorius is like a famous example. The Third Council of Constantinople does the work.
So this anathema against Honorius the First became a primary argument cited by opponents of the definition of papal infallibility during the First Vatican Council.
Did it?
What it says, yeah.
But he never claimed he was infallible. So it's a retarded counterargument, which we're always saying. It's a retarded counterargument unless we ever said popes couldn't be heretics. Why do some Catholics, maximalists, say popes can't be heretics? It's like Honorius. It's just retarded. Papal maximalism is the dumbest thing ever. Popes are just caretakers of the doctrine. And if they do a bad job, anathematize them. We have a constitutional problem if they claim to be infallible and then made an error. Otherwise, no problem. Papal maximalists are just making the rhetorical job of Protestants and Eastern Orthodox easier. They're not doing anything good for Catholics. Pope number 71, Severinus. Pope for 66 days only, from May of 640 to August of 640. He is of Roman ethnicity. His election was delayed for 20 months because he refused to sign a heretical imperial decree. But that wasn't for, I don't know who that was for. It wasn't for Honorius. That was years later. Pope 72, John IV, reigned from 640 to 642. A Dalmatian from Dalmatia. People, he was a dog? He was like a firehouse dog? No, Dalmatia is a place in Italy. A Dalmatian who sent gold to redeem captives taken by the Slavs in his homeland. Oh, you Slavs. Oh, man, I lost track.
From 70. This is 72.
Wait, I lost track of my non-papal guys, though. I mean, my non-sainted guys. It was like 12 in the first 70. So, all right, in the first 70, I'm stopping my count here. In the first 70, you had 12. You had a dozen non-saints. Pope 73, Theodore I, from 642 to 649, the first pope to officially be called Vicar of Christ. I thought that was someone else. Okay, so don't take that with a grain of salt. Theodore I from 642 to 649. I have contradiction between my two sources here. I thought about 7 or 8 popes ago, we had the first one to be called the Vicarius Christi. He was the last pope, Theodore I, from Palestine. He planned the Lateran Council of 649, but died before it could open. He was of Greek ethnicity. Didn't do that much else. Wasn't a saint. Pope 74, Saint Martin I, another saint, Roman citizen, last pope recognized as a martyr. Martin I was the last pope recognized as a martyr. Interesting. Kidnapped by the Byzantine emperor and died in exile in Crimea, named a martyr. Pope 75, Saint Eugene I, Pope from 654 to 657, elected while his predecessor Martin I was still alive and in exile, so not an anti-pope situation, a legitimate election. Pope 76, Saint Vitalian, 15-year pontificate from 657 to 672. He welcomed the Byzantine emperor to Rome, the first such visit in nearly 200 years. That's not that good. He had a visitor. Like, do something better, dude. You're Pope for 15 years almost. Like, do something.
You had a visitor.
You had a visitor. I mean, he was the emperor, but still, as a big visitor, but who cares? Pope 77, Adeodatus II, was Pope from 672 to 676. A monk, another monk, who gave the St. Peter's Monastery its own independence from outside control. So that's like personal prelature, early version of personal prelature, I guess. Member of the Order of St. Benedict. So he's the second or third member of the Order of St. Benedict. So Adeodatus I, who we already covered, was sometimes called Deus Dedit, and sometimes Adeodatus II is called Adeodatus I. Can't imagine why the Roman annuario is a mess, right? They're changing their names. Pope 78 is Donus, Pope for 1 year, 1.5 years, from 676 to 678. He was of Roman ethnicity. He paved the atrium of St. Peter's with large marble blocks. A lot of these guys didn't do that much. I mean, that's cool, but like, I don't know. It just seems like you could do more as Pope. Pope 79 was St. Agatho from 678 to 681. He was reputedly the first Pope to stop the payment of a fee to the emperor for the papal election. Interesting. St. Agatho, Greek ethnicity, also revered as a saint in Eastern Christianity. Pope during the Third Council of Constantinople in 680, the Sixth Ecumenical Council accepted by Catholics and EOs. Pope number 80, St. Leo the...
Agatho undertook negotiations between the Holy See and Constantine concerning the interference of the Byzantine court in papal elections.
Okay. Yeah, there was a lot of that interference for these pontificates. Interesting. Yeah, thanks for jumping in. Feel free if I'm missing something big. That Benedict or Boniface III establishment of Rome as head of all churches, common see or whatever, that's big. I don't know if I had that even for my debate with Jay. Wait, who was I on?
We're on 80.
80? Saint Leo II.
I don't think he's a saint.
I have Saint Leo here. Yeah.
Oh.
I have Saint. Expert in Greek and Latin, who is also a skilled musician. This is just like a CV. And he's just like super good at karate. Like he's like yellow belt in karate. Now that's great. You're good at Greek and Latin and also a good free throw shooter. That's not a lot there. St. Leo II. Let's see if there's another one. Pope from 682 to 683. Pope number 81. 85.
Oh, we're going to 85.
Yeah, we'll go to 85 today. We'll do another part of this. Pope St. Benedict II was of Roman ethnicity. Benedict II is Pope from 684 to 685. Persuaded the emperor to allow the clergy and people of Rome to elect the Pope without imperial confirmation. Okay, so the Pope could be elected without imperial confirmation because they're having that simony lay investiture really creeping up. So you see how responsive the Pope's requests are. They respond to what they think they need. Pope 82, John V, Pope from 685 to 686, the first of a series of Eastern popes who were Syrian or Greek. Pope 83, Conon, C-O-N-O-N, not a saint.
Interesting.
Greek ethnicity, he's part of that series of Easterns, was so ill and frail that he never performed a single ordination during his year as Pope.
What did he have? That's sad.
Like, that's rough. Conon. From 686 to 687. That's rough just being that sick. Pope 84 is St. Sergius I. He was Pope from 687 to 701. Introduced the singing of the Agnus Dei the Lamb of God during the Mass. That's cool. I mean, a lot of these middle guys do nothing. This is like the Chester A. Arthur period of the presidency. The first 50 are pretty based. And then we've hit a dry patch here with a lot of them. Was a Hellenized Syrian, introduced the singing of the Lamb of God at Mass. Finally,
Pope Sergius,
yeah.
He rejected the apostolic canons approved by the Eastern Church's Council of Trulio in 692, which made 3 Maccabees part of the biblical canon. This remains a difference between the Catholic and Orthodox canon today.
They have 74 books of the Bible. We have 73. It's a minor difference, but okay, that's good. Thanks for. So Sergius is the one that rejected that. Why would that not be his fact? Of course, a lot of the Protestants have like 66 and all these goofy numbers. We're like 73. They have 74, the EOs.
All righty.
Pope number 85, John VI, held the pontificate from 701 to 705, successfully paid off the Lombard Duke Gisulf to prevent him from attacking Rome. There's a lot of this prevention of attacking from Rome. We'll do the next 85 next time, but I would say it's nice to see the trends. The first 50 popes are really, really ballers. What is it? Only in the first 49, there was only 2. Yeah. And 50, Pope number 50 was the 3rd to not be a saint, but just so much important stuff happening in those first 50 pontificates. It's crazy. It's crazy how important the first 50 pontificates were and how many important things are there. Peter, Linus, Cletus, Clement I, Evaristus, Alexander, Sixtus, Telesphorus, Hyginus, Pius I, Anestidius, Soter, Eleutherius, Victor I, Zephyrinus, Calixtus, Urban I, Pontian, Anturus, Fabian, Cornelius, Lucius, Stephen I, Sixtus II, Dionysius, Felix, Eutychian, Caius, Marcellinus, Marcellus I, Eusebius, Miltiades, Sylvester, St. Mark, Julius I, Liberius, Damasus. Wait, Liberius is the first non-saint, right? The first 35 popes. Liberius is 36, non-saint. Damasus I, base. That's 37. Your laptop just went out. Damasus is 37. Siricius is 38. He's a saint. Saint Anastasius I is 39. Saint Innocent I is 40. Saint Zosimus is 41. Saint Boniface I, 42. Saint Celestine I is 43. Saint Sixtus III is 44. Saint Leo the Great is 45. Saint Hilarius is 46. Saint Simplicius is 47. Saint Felix III is 48. Saint Galasius, who introduced the 2 swords doctrine, is 49. And then Anastasius is 50. So really you only have 1 in the first 49, right? Yeah, okay. And I'm not going to go 51 to 85 because there are a lot of boring ones there. But we'll go 86 through 170 in another show coming up soon. Just good to be a little familiar with all the popes. I just think it's cool to do. And I think the main takeaway in here is in seeing how much important stuff the first 20 popes did. That you might even be tempted, if you didn't know, to admitting to Protestants that that these popes are making innovations. They were innovations that are followed through today and non-scriptural innovation. God bless you guys. Happy Saturday. We'll finish this list sometime soon in a part 2 and a part 3. Thanks for watching.